I know what you're thinking, because in my last wrap-up I told you that I was going to go back to doing monthly wrap-ups. What am I doing here then? Because it's only halfway through November and I'm here with a wrap-up. But that's because I've already read 9 books in November, and I do realize we're only halfway through the month. But I just decided that I'm going to do a wrap-up, and then hopefully the video won't be too long. Of the 9 books I've read, 5 of them are ebooks and 4 of them are physical books. So let me get started with the ebooks. The first book I read was a reread, and that is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. As I said, I've read this book already. I read it some years ago. I enjoyed it back then, but actually this time around I didn't enjoy it that much. I think that the rereading enhanced the book for me. This book is about a woman called Hester Prynne who has committed adultery. For that reason she has to carry a scarlet letter on her chest that she has with her at all times. I like the premise. I like how this book deals with taboos in society back in the days, but this book just is not interesting enough. It is written in a very plain manner. It has very little dialogue, so there are a lot of descriptions, and many of those descriptions are plain boring. I didn't like them, and also the characters are really flat. I didn't feel a connection with them whatsoever, which is a shame because I quite like the premise, but I just didn't like how the story was executed, so 2 stars for me. Next book I read is a book I had to read for work, and that is The Crucible by Arthur Miller. It is about the witch hunt back in Salem in the 1600s, and it's about a trial surrounding this witch hunt, and it was very interesting. I like the dark atmosphere that it gives you because it is about witches and deaths and magic. So I like that, and this book was good enough, but I gave it 3 stars just because it wasn't extraordinary. As I said, I had to read it for work, so it wasn't the best reading experience. I forced myself to read it, but luckily it's only 100 pages long, so I made it through and I gave it 3 stars. I also read Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, which is the sequel to Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. This is a book that consists of the fan fiction that we get in Fangirl, and I wasn't sure if I was going to read it, but after having heard so much about it on BookTube, I decided to eventually get it on my Kindle, and I'm very happy I did. Now, I really liked the story, especially the beginning was pretty much enchanting, because it's like Harry Potter but in a different setting and with different characters, and I loved it. The story also was quite interesting, but also a little bit silly at times. So what I'm trying to say is I really liked this book. I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5, but I felt like some of the behavior that we got from the characters was questionable. I felt like some of the things happening were a little bit too silly, but it was still good. I really like how this book focuses on friendship and a lot of very important values. So I think that you can learn a lot of great things from reading this book, and you feel like part of a community, which I really liked. Next we have another book that I had to read for work, and I have to look at the title, which is Rabbitproof Fence by Doris Pilkington. I'm not going to talk too much about this book. What I like about this book was that it gave me an insight into the stolen generation in Australia, and it was an interesting story, but once again it wasn't extraordinary, so 3 stars. And the last ebook before I move on to the physical books is November 9 by Colleen Hoover. Yes, this book was so good. I really liked it, and I was surprised to see that Colleen Hoover has gone back to her original writing style, which is a great romance story, amazing characters, and not that many sex scenes, because in her previous books we do have a lot of sex scenes which I was very much disgusted by. I didn't like them. I found them too detailed, too uninteresting, but this one doesn't have those, and it immediately enhanced the book for me. I liked it a lot. This is about 2 characters who meet on November the 9th, and they then agree on meeting each year on the same day and not have any contact whatsoever in between. So that's basically the premise of the book, and as I said, Colleen Hoover is amazing at writing characters, and I thought that this book would be predictable. I think I said so in a video, but it wasn't. I mean, there were so many twists and turns I didn't see coming, and I loved being surprised all the time, as well as reading about these characters whom I fell in love with. I wanted to know more about them, and it was just such a good book, so I gave it 4 stars. Now you're thinking, why didn't I give it 5 stars? Well, it wasn't amazing, it was just amazing, so that's why. Now on to the physical books. First we have The Orenda by Joseph Boyden, which takes place in Canada in the 1640s. A really interesting book. This gave me an insight into what it's like to live in Canada back in those days. It was so educating. Also a really good story that illustrates how people lived in clans and how they were fighting for their lives. Everything moved in circles. You kill someone from one clan and then they kill someone from your clan, etc. It was such a great story, definitely worth a read, so I gave this one 4.5 stars. I loved it dearly. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I finally got around to reading this book, which is considered a classic, I think, and I understand why this book is very popular, but I don't see why it's I am at a loss for words, because I mean, I do see why people find this book fascinating. I did as well. It is a dystopian, it is a very disturbing world that we're dealing with, and it deals with some taboos and some themes that are really important to talk about. But the execution of the story wasn't necessarily to my liking. I had a very hard time getting into it. I mean, it took me about half of the book to actually get into the characters and understand what was going on and appreciate the story. And then from there onwards, I quite liked it. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I know it's a lot of people's favorites, so you're going to be disappointed. But I mean, not all books are for everyone. And I just think that maybe the hype ruined this book a little bit for me. It made me feel depressed and isolated because it is so disturbing. And while that can't be a good thing once in a while, I just didn't like it this time around. So 3 stars for me. Another new release I read in November so far is Career of Evil by Robert Galbraith, which I really liked. I mean, Robin and Strike are just so amazing together. And in this book we have a lot of focus on them. I'm not going to go too much into it because this is the 3rd book in a series called the Cormoran Strike series. So if you haven't read the first 2 books, then maybe you should do that. But basically, I really like these books. I think they are so entertaining. They make me feel safe. Whenever I read them, I feel like I'm coming back home because I know these characters so well. They are written splendidly. They are written, after all, by J.K. Rowling, so what would you expect? And I just really like this book, so I gave it 4 stars. And the very last book I have read so far in November is also the biggest one, and that is a rereading of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the illustrated version. Now, I have read this book multiple times in my life, and obviously I gave it 5 stars. Did this illustrated version give me a new reading experience, a different reading experience from what I'm used to? Yes, it certainly did. I mean, these pictures, these illustrations were amazing, and they went so well with the story, so that even though I do have my own pictures in my head of what Dudley looks like and what Miss McGonagall looks like, I still really like these illustrations because they very much resemble the images in my head, but at the same time they gave something new to the story. It becomes kind of a different world with these kind of different characters and images. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically I definitely love reading this illustrated version, and I'm definitely going to continue on with reading the next illustrated versions, which will be out in the upcoming years. And that is it for my wrap up this time around. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day, everyone. Happy reading. Bye bye.